All right, hello. Welcome to my 1000 day challenge. This is day 546, so let's get things started. All right, so first and foremost, the banner looks more or less the same. I did mention that I entered a couple of short setup, and one is the break even, one a little bit of a loss. So net loss less than $1. As you can see, the difference is quite negligible. Yep, so other than that, nothing to be too much of a concern about. Currently only I did went for a little bit of a short setup, but I closed in terms of one for loss. And I'll update this after this video itself. And then there's also one I closed in the middle of halfway through a review through a longer time frame didn't make sense. So I closed that just as well. And then finally for the last one, I'm still in a short position right now. So, all right. So other than that, if you look in terms of US stock market itself, currently right now we do trend towards the further bearish momentum itself. Things doesn't look that good. I mean, in terms of short-term wise. Yeah. So if you look in terms of the daily chart itself, you can see that the line chart definitely looks bearish. As you can see, the day after day, we are closing a lower low, even though price action remains near this level itself. So definitely not a good sign because it goes to show that there is selling pressures in that perspective. But of course, the MACD has toned down a little bit. But let's see how things go. So as long as you do not break over there decisively, there's still a potential for a strong bounce. But the more days we spend along with it, the less chance this is likely to happen. Yeah, but that's not to say that the bull market is definitely over. We could definitely see some sort of a stronger bounce later along the way. So let's see how things goes. And yeah, so I'm definitely not bearish in terms of a mid to long term, say maybe in the 1 to 3 years period. Definitely not bearish. I do think that we will see much higher high than what we have seen in the November to December period itself. So nothing to be too much of a concern about, in my opinion. So even if we look from the high to the low, technically we draw off 15% for the stack itself. So yeah, nothing to be too much of a overly concerned. So for AHR, definitely looks a little bit more bearish, like what I mentioned on the daily chart itself. We do not want it to break this $36 region itself, and we're trending very close to it. On the bright side, we're having a very sharp drop towards that angle, I mean towards the support. So generally, if that does happen, we do have a strong chance of a bounce. The only question is how far bounce can it bounce? And depending on the strength of the bounce, it will affect perhaps the momentum then thereafter, because people will be looking at it in that sense. And then finally for KREP itself, things definitely looks to be bearish. I do not want price to stay near the low, the critical support region itself, because like what I mentioned, if we do break strongly below here, it's very much leaning towards the uncharted territory itself. So definitely further bearish momentum would be in place. But bear in mind that if you look overall, like what I mentioned, we really dropped, I think, 66% each as of yesterday from the all-time high. So even we do drop, say, maybe 20 to 30%, which I'm not too particularly concerned about, and the bounce could potentially happen unless, of course, the China market, equity market was to be so-called closed down in that sense. Not to say that that's impossible, because I do think that if you look in terms of the values of what the Chinese government have, is very vastly different. Because first and foremost, a mistake that I did make in our knowledge is the fact that the Chinese government is not capitalist in nature. So in other words, meaning to say the stock market wise to me would not be something that will truly reflect the values of the companies that they are listed in that sense. So regardless of the structure they have, and also in terms of the policy they have, would not be so favorable to companies itself. So for me, I've actually stopped adding in terms of my long-term position hold for equities in China market. That's not to say that I will sell out, simply because I don't think that it will go to zero, but at the same time, in terms of rebalancing my portfolio wise, the current percentage wise makes sense. Even though they have decreased quite significantly, I don't see the need to add in any further. I would probably cut down to probably 10 to 20% of my equity in China stocks, and the rest of it would predominantly be in the US stock market, and quite minimally in Singapore stock market, even though I'm based in Singapore in that sense. So yeah, it is what it is. And finally, for Bitcoin itself, I do see rather bearish. I say there isn't a clear supportive trend just yet, a reversal trend just yet, even though we do see potential bullish reversal, bullish divergence pattern itself. But yeah, we could definitely still see further lows here. We are still forming very distinct higher, lower lows, lower high in that sense. And on the forward chart, like what I say, is spread a little bit indecisive. There is potential sign that we could rebound, but until we could retest and break this 40K mark with strength and maintain support above it, I'm still leaning towards the neutral territory. And we could definitely break upwards and downwards. I'm leaning a little bit towards the downside, especially we are retesting here and here again. But the correct side is we are flatlining, so it could have somewhat like this. So we do consolidate for extended period of time. A break would be a much more decisive direction in that sense. So until that has taken place, I'll be quite staying off the market in terms of 4-hour and daily time frame itself, at least for Bitcoin itself. So otherwise, that's more or less about it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop by your comments below. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.